Welcome back to Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. I am Juliette Hahn, extremely tired, here with my co-host, Brent Sopel.
That's a new one.
Yeah. I used to do really well without sleep, like really well. I did not need a lot of sleep. My kids woke up multiple times a night when they were I enabled all of that. I'd be like, yes, I'm here. I never got a good night's sleep for years. I could do 4 hours. And then I hit fucking 48, 49, 50. It's like, hey, guess what? You're an old person now. If you don't sleep, you're a fucking asshole.
My kids woke up every night. Fucking, oh jeez, a lot of it was still, I don't know, 8, 9. Every time I was home, because I was always traveling. Every single night I was home, 3 a.m. She'd come wake me up.
Right.
Every time,
just to see you.
No, and then I'd I'd have to get up, take her back to bed, crawl back in bed, crawl back in bed with her, fall asleep every single night. Until she was 9, 10,
yeah.
So
yeah, mine didn't. And people will always say mine didn't. We had our boxers slept in bed with us. So our kids did not. When they were newborns, they did. I literally propped pillows next to me and I would nurse all night long. I mean, it was part of the problem why then they kept waking up. They were like, oh, wait, I'm hungry. But it was fine. I was like, you know what? It was 3 times a night, all of them. I mean, until they were 18, 19 months. And then I think they did sometimes and then sleep through the night, but not really. As you said, there was a time, and now I'm waking up at the same time every night when Carla, even if she's not crying, because now my body's like, oh, I guess this is what we're supposed to be doing. I'm like, no, it's not. And stop it. How do I not do it? I'm up at 3, then I'm up at 4, then I'm up at 5. And I'm just trying to go to sleep back.
I haven't slept through the night.
You said that.
30 years.
Oh, yeah. Maybe when you get, because you're not of the old age yet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, maybe this year. Aren't you turning 48? 47, 48.
48.
Yeah, that's when it starts.
Yeah.
We can report back and you can tell me how. That first time.
No report necessary.
I'm like, the sleep, please. I'm old and need to sleep. I'm taking chamomile tea before I go to bed, whatever. Anyways, that's not what we were talking about today. But when I don't sleep, also my attention deficit goes really, really fucking sideways. And then everything else does. It's so annoying. I can't even tell you. I'm so frustrated. I know there's worse things out there though. So we are going to talk about, I'm sure the listeners appreciated that little opening. And I'm sure they can recall some of our episodes. We were starting to talk about something and we're like, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about that. And there was, I want to say 3 or 4 episodes that we kind of did that. I was like, no, we can't talk about that, Brent. And you're like, okay, fine. So guess what? We can talk about it now. Do you want me to start?
Well, this is all you. It's been your family's journey. It's been your journey. A couple times this kind of example in your family. So,
so fun,
isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. So my oldest, Montgomery, has the 5 Ds, 4 of the 5 Ds, right? We all know this. I have my sister, my dad, but just one of my sisters was diagnosed. And my middle son, Truman, going into junior year, he started taking some AP classes last year, chemistry and a couple other classes started to kind of give him some trouble. He's always been a decent student, a little above average. I shouldn't say that, above average, but school never really was difficult. Since school was really difficult for Montgomery, I was like, okay, you're good. You're good. You're good. Shake hands. We're good. And as we've been doing the podcast as we've been doing, diving into more research on the 5Ds. There's been a couple times where I was like, wait, Truman did that when he was little. Huh. That kind of, huh. Thinking about it, like, oh, that's interesting. He had a really bad speech impediment. He talked really early, but no one could understand him. He was slow to read, but he could read. So I was like, okay, it's just a boy thing, right? He's a summer birthday, that typical thing that everyone says that we tell people like to go fuck off. I did that. He's a summer birthday. He didn't really have to get instruction though. It was just like was in maybe like he needed a little extra help in the classroom, but never had to go out of the classroom. Some things like that. Math always was a little bit like maybe he would like, oh, I didn't do well on that test. I have to go retake it. And then fine. Okay. So, and then we did have a tutor, but we all of my kids had a tutor for math just because of my dyscalculia. He would always was like on top of it. Right. So he would get like a tutor until we got to algebra 1, pre-algebra, algebra 1. Like he was always like an A student, then it was like a B, and then it was like, okay, now I'm a little bit like getting a little where it C's, and it was like, okay, are you struggling in it? No, it's just a lot of work. Okay, so you don't feel like putting the work in, but you're a very hard worker. So some of the teachers would say he just needs to focus and put a little bit more work in. That started happening last year, and that's when my senses kind of started going off, and then I was like, wait a second, you know what? He's really terrible at spelling. Always kind of has been, but I haven't seen his work. I really don't help my kids, as we've talked about many times, in school. So I really haven't seen his stuff. He never has had any teacher say, hey, I think you need to look into this. Right.
Well, we know they're not going to. So check.
Right. So like that's again, but I was kind of always like, didn't think anything of it. When Truman there was probably some times where I was like, maybe he has like the hypo attention deficit. Or he could be a little spacey when he was little, but nothing that was like no really big red flags. Lots of friends, love sports, always happy to go to school. There's times where he would say, I'd rather take a test. I like tests because I like to see. And I was like, okay, then, in my head, just
the opposite of us.
Right. Yeah. But he doesn't have any test anxiety. Now, one of the things that is really interesting about Truman, he really does not have anxiety. He's a very kind of even keeled, laid back human. Sort of like when I've talked to my husband was the same way. Like stressors in life really didn't get to him until he was like, the head of a household. And it was like, okay, now I got to stress about 5 other people. So maybe I have a little bit more stress than I did. But he is very kind of just like practical, chill, like puts the work in. In my head, like he always got it done in school, always figured it out, like was never doing tons of homework when he got home, but always, he's been on the honor roll, like good grades, average, good, above average grades. So after last year, I was like, you know what, honey, like how much are you really struggling? And I'm sorry, because one teacher said to me, you just need to try harder. And then I lost it. It was the guidance counselor.
Yeah.
I lost it because I was like, I don't think you should be taking algebra 2. Like, I feel like if you can put that off your junior year, especially if you want to play basketball. And I know from Montgomery, like your junior year, like some of these classes are harder. You had a couple classes that gave you some difficulty. Like, I feel like we need to explore something here. Everyone was like, are you crazy? He is not dyslexic. And I was like, there's something. I'm like, I'm telling you, there's something, and I want to get him tested. So I went looking for a doctor. Time and time again, it was like, oh, we're a psychologist's office with a educational psychologist from school. And I was like, okay, no,
thank you.
I know I don't want that. And I couldn't, but as we were doing word blindness, right, there were so many times that I was like, we would talk things through, or we would hear from a parent, like, this is the neuropsych I got. It was a school psychologist that went into their own practice. And I'd be like, oh my God, that's so interesting. Right. I'm starting to put more 2 and 2 together. This is how a lot of times we do get our knowledge though, right? This is like how we get kind of learning from other people's experiences and then diving into and doing our own stuff. Right.
Absolutely. That's, our experiences have led us down other paths, and to dive in more experiences with other people to be able to connect the dots. And information is power. More experiences, is power. That's why we come here and talk about it, because we have struggled, we have dove into our own stuff, and a ton of other people's other stuff to get a lot of these answers.
Mm-hmm. Right. And before I wasn't talking about it because I didn't know. And it was like, and I needed to talk to Truman about, do you mind if and he said, what did he say?
Answers. And this isn't a 2-week or a 3-week process. It's been, probably 6 months now.
I feel like it's been longer, but probably.
Yeah.
I'm terrible with that, but yeah.
But it takes time to, and this is the way it happens a lot. When you have a, extremely dyslexic kid, that struggles, a lot. And like, obviously Montgomery, myself with the 4Ds. And then just like it's very common when you have two kids, one's dyslexic and the other one's not, and the other one's an honor roll student and whizzing through school. And why isn't, this, so this happens all the time where, somebody may not be as severe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And be able to push through school, but this is when it starts kind of rearing its head. High school, mid high school, sophomore year, junior year, things are getting a little bit harder. Tests are a little bit harder. Words are getting harder. More information, longer problems. So this is a lot of times when it starts. People start asking that question: is there something here, or is it just school?
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And then these are the questions that are really important for parents to ask, because there was a lot of people that were like, well, why does it matter? Like even Truman was like, well, why does it matter if I have something, like I've gotten this far? So why does it matter? And it brings it back to the roadmap that you always talk about. It's really important to have that roadmap, especially if you also want to go to university. But then even if you don't want to go to college, right, it still knows how you learn. And when you get out into the workforce, when you have kids, when you have grandkids, there's so many things to be like, you know what? I look at that. So Truman does not have a lot of trauma from school, right? So even though he is diagnosed with, which I was surprised with one, he has dyscalculia. When I say dyscalculia, he gets angry. He's like, stop saying it that way.
That's the worst.
It is the worst. And every time I say it, I think I roll my eyes. I've been watching clips. So, but it is the correct way to say dyscalculia, but dyscalculia. And he's dysgraphic. And to me, dysgraphia, I thought I knew all about dysgraphia. And so I had all these questions for the doctor. I was like, wait, I'm so confused. Now, yes, Truman does have messy handwriting. I have messy handwriting. But I always considered it like my dyslexic handwriting. I always considered Truman was going fast, but it's not his dysgraphia is not, it's not the motor skills. His is the processing of the of the dysgraphia. So we kind of dove into that because I always took dysgraphia to be the handwriting, but there's so much more to it. I also always thought my dyslexia was like, I can't get out of what's in my head. Like I can't speak and then put it on a piece of paper.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I always thought that was my dyslexia. And then I was like, well, wait a second. Am I also? Jesus, this is like the unpeeling of the onion. Like, what else am I? So it was very interesting.
And you use the words all the time. I can think what I need to say and want to say, but I can't put it on pen and paper.
Right. I cannot do that at all. So the doctor said that's what Truman struggles. So I asked Truman and he said, no, I don't struggle with that. In the testing, so I said to her, and she's like, that's so interesting. He doesn't realize.
Yeah.
Because he's never, it's just always been. And he's figured ways around it. And that's what is so incredible, that he's figured ways around it. So there's like, he's worked it, right? He's smart. He knows what to do. It's like, okay, I know how to do it.
Yeah.
And this is where schools, which you can understand, we give the benefit of the doubt to teachers in schools. It's like, okay, well, they might have a slight. He's not severe. He has the slightness of it, but it still hinders when things get harder.
And that's why, later in school, cause A high school is one that was coming up. Somebody said to me, why don't you just tell me what you see? What do you mean? How am I supposed to tell you? Same thing, Montgomery, Truman. We find our ways around it. We don't know. We almost don't know it's an issue.
Right.
Because it's been there the whole time. It's not like it wasn't there, then it is. Right. Oh, that wasn't there before. No, like when somebody said to me, why don't you just tell me what you see? I just, because we don't know what we see. Like,
we don't know that we see something different. Yeah.
Right. But I was just, that one still always gets me. What do you mean? And so we find ways around it because we have no other option. We don't even know that we have that. We don't know that. It's not like we're right-handed writers and we go to left hand now. Okay, we know there's a difference, right? We don't know. It's this is why knowledge is powerful.
Mm-hmm. And so the testing, just because I'm sure people have a lot of questions right now, we did find someone who's awesome. It was a referral, and we did I think he had 3 days on Sundays, and he was missing football. He was was not thrilled about that, but he did it because he's like, okay, as I said, he's very easygoing. I was like, yeah, it's fine. Afterwards I was like, did it suck so bad? Oh my God. Cause I remember, he's like, it wasn't fun, but whatever. It was, they did a lot of math. So he is dyscalculia, and that's visual. So that also is tied in with the spelling, which I thought was very interesting too, because I was like, oh, I just always assumed dyslexia was always just about the spelling. So one of the things, and this is what fascinates me with brains, and when people get together and get married and they mish their genes together. So his language is really, really, really strong. She's like above average. Like his language is so strong. Now, Montgomery, that even though he has dyslexia and that is one of his weaknesses, there's a part that he also has that. Like Penelope's very strong in that. And like my brother, there's like people in my family that are very, very strong. Like she goes, I was actually taken back how strong his language actually is. She goes, so it was like really quickly off the bat, I was like, oh, this kid's not dyslexic. This is so interesting. She goes, but then, so that he was very high on things and then very low on things. And she goes, and when that happens, you're like, wait a second.
And that's more times than not.
Mm-hmm.
Very rare. It's like Montgomery and I, where we're very low on everything.
Right.
Unfortunately, this is what makes things tough. This is what makes things hard. Is that we find a way around things so early to disguise them.
Right. But you don't even realize you're disguising, right?
No.
Yeah. Just figuring it out. Yeah.
Figuring out. That's why I call them defense mechanisms. People don't even know you have defense mechanisms because you don't know what to look for. Mm-hmm. It's we're smart, we're brilliant, finding ways around things at a very young age and disguising them in ways like this. And it's, you said something, it's for later on, obviously, all this stuff is hereditary. So it's going to be passed down. But if you're going into college or you're going into the workforce, it's understanding what all this means, for you now, for you in the future, for your family in the future, for your future employments, what makes sense, what do you want to do, is being a writer. I'm not saying you can't be a writer, but is that maybe not be the best path if you have two paths? Just using that as a, as an example.
Or like a mathematician, right? So like, and that's what you said, like going into school, a mathematician, like a math teacher. But so like that, those are things, as you just said, like when you go to college, he wants to go to college. So like, okay, your major, yes, could you get through it? Yeah. But do you want to put that extra pressure on yourself knowing, okay, I want to go, like, this is an example. And we talked about this with Montgomery. But when I first went into school and I went into corporate fitness, like at fitness, I was like, oh, this will be easy. I get into fitness, I'm so good at that. But then I had to take anatomy and physiology because fitness, you have to know. And I was like, oh my God, okay, holy fuck, that's not the way my brain works,
Yeah.
And so those kind of things. And I remember there was one time Montgomery was saying, like, being a fitness trainer, and it seems like that's okay, because that's like where his strength is. But then when you break it out and what you have to learn there, sometimes those kind of things are hard. So it's like, okay, how can I figure that out and do it maybe in a different way? We talked to Danielle Fetty being a nurse, right? Now she was strong in science. So like her dyslexia, which is interesting, like the English and the history is where she was weak. That's what my family what is so interesting about us is their English and our history is what are stronger. So Montgomery's dyslexia, that's where the doctors are always like, that's so interesting because that's his strength, but then he has a learning disability in it. So it's like, that's like a, kind of like a mind fuck, right? It's like, this is where you're strong, but this is also where you have your deficit. So Truman doesn't have the deficit in the language. And so that's like something where, he takes like history, he can sit there and listen to the teacher and he just absorbs it. He loves history. Like he always has, does really well. He takes 2 APs now. Like that's, in English he would, but he's like the writing part of that is difficult in it, even though he never has put those two together. But now that, and he's a slow reader. And she said his decoding, she's like, he doesn't have the best decoding. She's like, but he figures it out. So I do remember him being a slow reader when he was little and thinking, oh no, and asking, I do feel like I have to talk to my mom a little bit about it, but I do feel like, I was always on high alert after obviously Montgomery.
Oh,
like,
I'm sure you were.
Yeah,
every parent, 100% you were. It just wasn't as severe and screaming from the rooftops, as Montgomery. And when you scream from the rooftops and struggle as severely as having 4Ds, it kind of brings that pressure down a little bit.
Right. So that was really interesting. So when we got so he did the 3 tests, she said 3 days, 3 Sundays. I think they were an hour and a half, 2 hours. She said he might have to do a 4th, but we'll see. And then, it was like, what, I've got a pretty good things. And she was really cool because she loved the science behind all of the research that she's done. So she does the applied, like where it's like, okay, she's read something, but then she sees how the kid, she's like, so I don't like to like go in and be like, okay, this test says this and that. She like watches them. And so I really liked her method of how he was diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And so this is the next question that I know people will ask, like, okay, so she's like, I don't want him to have an IEP. She goes, I know your district and it will be a fight that you don't need to do because they're going to say, look at his grades. Like, he's got a low A, high B on most stuff, like again, where someone now
low A, high B. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, he gets good grades, not in science and math. So those always bring down, his grade, but like his history and English are always really high. So his average, like he usually has like a 90 something GPA. I don't think he's ever really gone under that except 10th grade. A couple chemistry killed him. And that math, he had to take like a lower math or like it was like the math before instead of taking the algebra 2. And so that's why this year I was like, you know what? I have such trauma with algebra 2. Like, I think I took like 2 weeks of it and they were like, you got to get out. Like you can't even, and I was never taught it correctly anyways. So we also learn a very, very specific way when you have dyscalculia, there's not a lot of resources. And that's what one of the things the doctor said. She goes, not like dyslexia. She goes, there's really not a lot of stuff that you can do, especially at this age. She goes, however, so we're not going to do an IEP because you don't need it. She goes, it's a fight that you don't need. And there's really not a lot of remediation that can happen. So you're going to do a 504. And she put together all these accommodations. And I have to talk through with Truman because he has never had to do that going into your junior year. I remember that's when I had to then go to the resource room, and I have a lot of shit around that. Or I had a lot of shit around that I feel like I've let go, but that sucked. Like it was like all of a sudden, bless you. Oh, yeah, all of a sudden it was like, wait, why are you in our classes? oh, your grades suck. Yeah, I probably should have been here the whole time, but I didn't get a diagnosis earlier, right? So there's parts that we have to kind of dive into and look into and talk through. But now we know, and I had a lot of guilt around it. I shed some tears around it. I talked to Truman about my guilt, and he kind of was like, "What? Why are you guilty?" He's like, "Mom, I'm totally fine." And I was like, "Yes." However, I also just was like, "You're fine because I need you to be fine." I don't think I can handle all like this again. When you were little, it was just a lot. And so I felt, like he kind of had to figure it out on his own. But there's a bunch of points that I want to talk on, but I want to let you, since I'm just babbling, if you have anything that you want.
You're not babbling at all. Walking, there's a lot that goes into all this. It's never cookie cutter. It's never one size fits all. And especially when you have one already that has more, that is more severely, so it gets just, one of the biggest things is that we're smart. We're very, very, very smart, very brilliant, finding ways around things. That just gives you a clue how smart we are to be able to navigate our own little world without even knowing what our world is. He found his way around things without even knowing. Oh, this is just me, right? We find ways around things. Like myself, back in hockey, I never napped, right? Only person probably player in the world ever not to. So, my ADHD and dyslexia worked when I got to the rink. People are like, what? How'd you know that? I didn't know that.
No. You put two and two together later.
Yeah, you put it together. So you just find ways around things and resources around things without even knowing. So that's the brilliant side of who we are to navigate things around there. But sometimes it comes to a head when you run into certain things. And now, right now, obviously, 2 to year 3, I've been tested. Have some things, but that roadmap for them moving forward is there. It's in their back pocket. They have the understanding of how to be able to move forward with it. What Montgomery's roadmap is, and what Truman's roadmap is. Obviously, Penelope's 8th grade. So, could she? And yes, but she's your little reader. So. Think...
Well, so she's right. She's 9th grade, the first year of high school, but she's like very strong. I mean, like 99, like very strong in school, but she also works. This is what's really interesting. And this is, I think, what's important, like for 2 things. So, and why what we are doing with the foundation is talking about educating earlier, educating, because a teacher is not going to realize, oh, okay, Truman actually has, even though his brother has these things, like because as you just said, there's things that he's worked around to get around, not even realizing he's getting around. So someone might say, well, okay, well, so still, what's the point? Like, what is the point? Yes, I hear the roadmap and stuff like that, but if there's nothing you can do. However, if he was diagnosed earlier, he would have had like the study skills that when he got into 10th and 11th grade, when things got harder, he would actually have had those skills as a young kid. Right. Now, Montgomery had all of that. He's first year school. I think one of the things that I laughed about, I was like, I haven't heard anything about school yet. He is not doing what he is meant to be doing. And I know that. And it'll be interesting when all of a sudden he's like, hey, Mom, so every time, yeah, everything's good. Everything's good. So he knows what he needs to do. He still loves to try to cut corners because it takes a lot of work to get it done. It is exhausting. And yes, even if you don't have any of the 5Ds and you're in college, it's still a lot of work and you're taking hard classes. It takes a lot of work. And so we're not saying that that's what it is, but it is a different kind of work when you're struggling. Correct. And people don't always like, oh, he gets good grades. So doesn't matter. But he's worked a ways around and he has a very atypical way of studying, I'm sure, because It's not like, and then some of those classes, it didn't work anymore. So that was very interesting as she broke it down. It also helped me as a parent understand. That's so interesting. So that's why chemistry, it was I wasn't allowed to take chemistry because I was the dumb girl.
I took chemistry and I think I got a 25.
Right.
Oh,
You,
God,
you probably shouldn't have been allowed to take it either. I took environmental science.
I don't know what that was. We didn't have that. Oh my God, it was torture.
Oh, I'm
Complete
sure.
torture.
And the thing that's interesting is Truman was like, I could have thought it would have been interesting. He watched Breaking Bad, that show. So it was like, there's like interesting parts. He's like, but whoa, no, I didn't like, he did not enjoy that at all. So could he have had the study skills to be able to make it maybe a little bit easier? Who knows? Because some people are really, good in science. Some people are not. There's like, all of us have our intelligence, our strengths and weaknesses. So we're not saying getting him diagnosed is now going to take away, any of it's not going to make the weaknesses strengths now, but it could help build them up and make them a little bit more. And
again,
so
that understanding is just so key to this, because if you don't have some of that understanding, like you said, to build up those, some of those things, if you don't know, you don't have the understanding of what they are, you can't build them up. Because they're not built up in the atypical way, as you just referred to.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so again, for the teacher, that's like not mentioning it. They're like, oh, he's a little slow. Oh, but he got it. Okay. He just, there are kids that are slow to read, that maybe are not dyslexic, right? So there are things that it's hard, but if we can educate and give little kind of cues, oh, okay, that's interesting. Like the spelling, when someone's really important spelling, there is something that's there. Like there is, whether now I understand it's also like a, slight dysgraphia. And because it's a visual thing, which is, or that's also could be a part of I might be wrong on that one. That might be the dyscalculia with the spelling. It's something that was so interesting the way she explained it. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I know a lot of stuff, but I didn't ever correlate those two things together. Yeah. And so what we will do is go through all of all the testing that she gave back. We'll go and sit down with Truman and say, okay, here are the accommodations, because also SATs, there's things that like, you know what? I mean, he's like, Mom, I'm the first one out. I don't want untimed. And I'm like, yeah, untimed didn't work for me. I have a friend that her daughter is dyslexic, and untimed actually, like it is, oh no, she's not dyslexic. She's, I forget what she has. She's got an eye disorder, and she's really, really smart. But the untimed actually, she needs it because of her eyes. But schools give her a hard time because she gets really good grades. But if she doesn't get the untimed, it really screws her.
That's so it's leveling the playing field. So if you're trying to climb a ladder and you only have one leg, you're not going to climb as fast. You may get through it, absolutely, but not as fast as somebody else that has two legs, right? So it's giving it's evening the playing field, making it so that playing field is always level, for each individual, each kid. Because if you're trying to climb that ladder with one leg, you're always going to, is it fair for you to struggle? No. Is there ways that we could be able to help you not to struggle and make the playing field a little more level? Absolutely. And that's what this is all about. Yeah.
Right. It's not giving someone a leg up. You're always going to compensate, right? With the one leg, you're compensating and working extra hard. And it's like, you know what, let's even. So, because I was telling someone about Truman, and they were like, okay, what? And they're like, I'm not being rude, but like, what is the big deal if he gets okay grades? Like he gets good grades, not okay. He gets good grades. Like what is the point? Like you just spent a lot of money. And I'm like, right. And here are all the different points. And someone still might say, yeah, it's not. But as life gets harder, as we said, university, college, all of these different things, this year, I was able to talk to the teacher, or, I mean, he was able to talk to he's going to be able to talk and be like, I need the notes before. Let's see if it helps. Let's see if he uses it. I mean, it's all very interesting. It was not the same journey as I did when I went through it with Montgomery. Very different. Yes, I did have guilt, but I did talk to him about it. And I said to Truman as I cried, I said, I feel really guilty. I hope you never feel like that you were struggling and you couldn't come to me because I was too, and he was like, yeah, no, never felt any of that. And I'm like, okay, good. Typical teenage boy. He's like, no, you're fine. But I felt like, fuck, I know so much about it and I still didn't catch it.
Again, you know so much about it. You didn't catch it. It's not always easy to catch when you find ways around things.
Exactly.
That's where how smart we are. We're not waving our hands, hey, look at us, right? We're doing the opposite. Mm-hmm. We're finding ways. Okay, I need to get to that. How can I get to that without people seeing that I can get to that this way? And that's how we do it. So it's every one of these journeys is unique. Mm-hmm. And especially when you've gone through with your family, your dad and your sister, right, yourself. There's a lot to it. Each one of you is different and poses different strength and poses different weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is listening to cues of what your kid says and thinking about this, because there's a couple of times where like Truman's guidance counselor was like, when he went into high school, like, you should be taking APs here. Why aren't you? You like had 100 in history. And he said to me, and so I understand why the guidance counselor said what he said. Truman said to me, Mom, it's so much work in the summer. I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to do that. And I was like, all right, but I don't know if that's the best, but again, we've talked about, I push my kids in certain things, but I'm not going to I don't want them to ever have stress that's undue. That's not necessary.
But I don't understand that. What do you mean you have work in the summertime? I'm still
a lot of work in the summer. So a lot, you have to like 3 papers, big papers. Yeah. I mean, it just shows those are the kids dedicated to their academics. So you have summer work.
I didn't know that was possible. School is over.
Yeah. Nope. Not when you have APs. So freshman year, he didn't. And now I know when he says, I was like, all right. And that's where the guidance counselor was like, he just has to work harder. And then when I was thinking about it, so I said to him, when you said it's a lot of work, was it because you just didn't feel like doing it? And he's like, yeah, it's the summer. I've just worked really hard. We put extra effort into things that people don't realize, right? You're working so hard to get stuff done that he just is like, I just need a break, right? But someone could hear that and be like, oh, he's just lazy on it, right? But that's the things that we hear all the time. Yeah. You're just being lazy. You're just being lazy. But sometimes anatomy and physiology, could have I figured it out? Yeah, with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And I could have, but it wasn't supposed to be my path, right? So I need, thank God. But those are the things that we as parents, we as teachers, we need to hear. If someone's saying it's just too hard or it's too much, let's listen to some of those patterns. And then that's where you can ask those questions. But I, again, didn't think oh, it's too much. I just thought he didn't want to put summer work in because he's working. I don't understand school either.
I don't still get summertime.
Yeah, I was like, I don't. Yeah, I don't. It's stupid. I won't. I don't blame you. I don't want to do it either.
I didn't know it's possible. I wouldn't be doing that either.
Yep. And a lot of times he waits to the last minute, and then the adrenaline gets him to get it done. But I always also just thought that's how I do everything. Anything that I need, that's really important. School, that's how I always did it. So it's just little things that now I can look back on and be like, the speech impediment. That was one that really, that's, I think, what I feel like started everything. Do you remember where we heard that? I think I brought that up to you and I forget who told me, or did you bring it up to me? And I was like, oh, wait a second. I was like, Montgomery did not have a speech impediment at all. This is what's so interesting, like at all. He was so clear, spoke like so early. Like people were like, that little person just like had a conversation with me. I was like, I know, it's kind of freakish. he's very young and he can speak like so crazy. Truman spoke very early, but I was the only one that really could understand him. Like even my husband would be like, Dan would be like, what did he say? And I would have to like whisper so we didn't make Truman feel bad because I never wanted anyone to be like, what? I never wanted him to get frustrated.
Yeah.
So I would like repeat it, so he never realized. And Dan's like, how do you understand that? I could read Montgomery's handwriting and I can understand that's a mother. But those are kind of things that's that delay in speech, even though it's not, it just wasn't. And so there's things like as early, like with Montgomery's dysgraphia, how he ate, right? If I knew like he did not pinch, he grasped. Truman didn't do that. He pinched. Oh my, everything was like a handful and he would choke. Be like, oh my God. Oh my God. And my sister, we actually had the funniest thing I will never forget because our kids are literally a week apart. And we were together. I think I did a trip when he was like 6-7 months old. I flew down to Charlotte and we had the high chairs and she was putting food and she was putting like big giant like pieces. And I was like, Montgomery's going to choke. She's like, no, he's not. She's like, oh my God, you're such a weenie. He's not going to choke. And she watched him go like this and shove him in her mouth. And she's like, oh my God. And I was like, I can't buckle him in. He chokes on everything. So I'm always doing like the half-I manure. It's really stressful. She's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I knew you were saying this, but I didn't see. She's like, oh my God. She's like, why is he eating that way? I mean, and again, we called him lead hands, right? All of these things that were kind of like those silly things because he would always spill his milk. Those are big signs of dysgraphia. Yeah. Truman didn't have any of those, right? He didn't have those.
That was Lila. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Born in a China shop.
Yeah. And that's what my parents used to say about me. I was a bull in a china shop. So those are little things that we hope like, a grandparent, a parent, has a kid and is like, oh, so interesting. Because really they're supposed to pick up food like this with their two fingers.
And the fine motor skills.
Yeah.
I always talk about, tying your shoes, right? How many of us can't tie our shoes? It's that fine motor skills.
Yep. But that's also the craziest thing, right? Because Montgomery taught himself to tie his shoes and then taught Truman.
Yeah.
Bradley, who had the best pincher and ate like so beautifully, couldn't tie his shoes. So it's like so interesting how the brain works. And that's why like sometimes it's not just black and white, right? It's not like, oh, okay. And that's why it's asking questions, diving in a little bit more, hearing stories like ours and being like, you know what? It keeps coming up. I need to look for it. And then you got to go find the doctor. And that's not easy. Yeah. And that took me, I called like, I can't even tell you how many remember I was like, oh my God, I ran into another dead end. What the hell?
Well, a dead end because you weren't looking for the school psychologist. Right.
Yeah, I was like, no, thank you. No, thank you.
That's the big difference. School psychologist basically does half the work. Intense. So listeners have some understanding what we're talking about. They almost do half the work, half the report. Than what a normal neuropsych does, right? So it's most neuropsychs are 20 to say 25 pages, something like that. You're only going to get 10 to 14, half the work, half the answers that you're looking for.
And they don't break it down in the same way. And that's one of the things that we're going to dive into a little bit more on it. But in back in the day, there was not school psychologists that did the reports in my, it was like schools only took it from a neuropsych. Now you can have a neuropsychologist, but they have an educational specialist that comes into their office because that neuropsychologist is not an educational specialist. This is what I understand. So they have to then have someone that's an educational specialist, and a school psychologist has that educational. And it's not that they're like, oh, I'm going to try to mess you up on purpose. It's the training that they had. So it's like how they diagnose people in school. When they do that, they do a lot of tests, but they don't use those same words. It's a whole different world and field. And they also, like, if there's mild things, they won't use the word. It's just, there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it that we're not going to dive into now, because we just finished that 45 minutes. So any of the listeners that have listened and were like in the previous episodes, what the hell are they talking about? Or I was like, no, we're not talking about that. This is what it was.
Right.
Because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know, I had strong feelings. Dan didn't. Like, he was like, I really don't think any of it. But then he was like, oh, all right, that makes sense. And so there was a lot to it. Like, he didn't 100% agree. It was a lot of money. And then there was, after, I think, like the third, maybe after the second, after the first one, she's like, yes, there's highs and then there's lows. There's definitely something, stuff here. Cause of course I asked like 1,000 questions after each session. Like, what did you see here? Like, I just need to know, just give me a piece. Like, am I crazy? Or is like, whatever. And she was awesome. And so then after the second one, there was a little bit like, his highs are really interesting. Yeah, there are some lows, but I don't know if it's a deficit. It might be a weakness. And there are like a line there. That's hard. So, yeah.
It wasn't easy. It was a process, but now you're on the other side of it. And now he's equipped with the understanding moving forward.
Yep. Yes. And we'll see.
That's all you can ask for.
Exactly.
How that ends up, playing out. You've got now you have the information. Now he can, level that playing field for the rest of his life.
Yep. And we're going to leave it on that, because that was a great last sentence. So thank you guys for joining Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed for another episode of therapy. Well, this is an unloading. You guys know what I say every time: like, rate, review, and share. And we'll see you for another episode next week. I don't know. I actually did pretty well speaking there until the end.
You did good.
Now I'm tired. All right, bye.